for this neck reset video on a Made in USA Martin. My name's Scotty D, and this one needs a neck reset. It's a 000C-16 or 000C-16 RGTE, and it was made in the USA like I said before, but this one's a little unique in that the owner had the back sides and neck refinished in a gloss nitro finish. And we're going to take a look at the neck angle and the saddle height and get started on a neck reset. Hopefully this helps someone out that is going to approach the same repair as we're doing today. And I know that it's either a simple dovetail joint or a mortise and tenon. We're going to find out. So this guitar sounds great, plays great. It has an action of 4/64 at the 12th fret. It has a relief of 9/1000 of an inch at the 7th fret with string tension, and it has 12 through 53 strings. It was built in 2005 here in the USA, Nazareth, Pennsylvania. The real problem is this saddle height is too low, and the owner would just like to have a taller saddle and a neck reset. So let's get going. He's going to also have a couple other things done while it's in. We're going to replace the Pickguard. We'll probably fix those exaggerated string slots in front of each bridge pin. We're going to put on some Waverly tuners that he supplied, tuning machines, and get a new saddle. And probably put in a new nut if needed. Well, we'll get started with the neck reset now. Well, the problem with working on a guitar that's been refinished is that there could be adhesion issues with the lacquer. It looks like they did a fantastic job, and from what I heard, he has a lot of experience with refinishing. But I'm going to go take this down to the garage and brush lacquer retarder all around the joint to soften the lacquer a little bit and make sure that it doesn't become brittle and bubble and crack as I apply the heat to the joint. We'll do that down in the garage because I cannot stand the smell of lacquer retarder. Let's go. Two more important measurements I wanted to look at before I pull the neck is that there is a little bit of fall away on the bass side. Nothing on the treble side. Yeah, a little bit on the bass side. There's a little fall away, a little hump here at the neck to body joint, and then it dips down a little towards the sound hole. The other measurement is the top deflection. How much the belly rises up at the just behind the bridge. We've got 51/1000 of an inch top deflection. I'll loosen the strings and we'll see how that might change. And there it is with the strings off of it, 29/1000. So we've got basically 22/1000 of an inch of top deflection. That's how much it comes up in the middle when the strings are tight. So that needs to be accounted for when we determine our final neck angle. Upon really close inspection, I can see that the neck was finished off of the body, and that there is no real bead of lacquer right there, but there is a little gap, and I see it all the way around. Anyways, I'm just brushing, as a precaution, I'm brushing the retarder on here, and I'm going to set it in the next room for a couple hours, just because. I'll use a number 11 X-Acto blade to score between the heel and the body. This is just a precautionary measure just in case there's a little buildup of lacquer or glue around this area. And this is the little serial number plate that Martin puts in. It's a little piece of maple, and they stick it onto the neck block to cover up a bolt. I get a pipette full of denatured alcohol and squirt it in there, and then I take a razor blade and jam it in there. A little more denatured there. I just kind of douche it all over the place, don't I? Anyways, I get in there with some sort of steel object and pry it off. With a little bit of patience, it starts to loosen after just a little while. I'm using an endoscope inside of the guitar, and I have the guitar on its side. And now we can see that little brass bolt there. Lots of double-sided squishy tape. 000C-16 RGTE Aura. I get in there with the screwdriver. This one, if you'll notice, had no tension on it at all. Maybe that was part of the problem there, that the next set wasn't good from the factory. It got bumped and it just wasn't ever a good angle. Lay, lady, lay, lay upon my big brass bolt. That's my little setup there for removing that plate and getting that bolt out of there. Now I'll use a 250 watt heat lamp with some steel, some cardboard, some aluminum foil. I'm trying to protect the binding, because that ABS binding or PVC binding, man, its melting point is pretty low. Anywho, after about 10 minutes, I'm able to get some spatulas going through there, and we'll separate the fretboard extension from the soundboard. You have to read the soundboard. If you look in front of the bridge, you'll see that the left side of the spruce looks darker than the right side. From this angle, I'm talking about the treble side looks darker, okay? That means that when you're coming in the bass side of the fretboard, you don't want to come in from the sound hole side. You could dig into the spruce. You could dive into the spruce fibers if you don't read the grain runout properly. And you'll see in a second when the neck comes off that there was no damage to the soundboard. The spruce was 100% good, intact, no damage from the palette knives. I'll remove the 15th fret, and I'll also remove the 14th fret. I'll drill some holes. The mortise and tenon joint is only 7/8 wide, so I'll come from center, I'll move over about 3/8 of an inch and drill a hole. So we're going to have holes that are spaced about 3/4 of an inch apart. I also angle the drill bit down towards the center as I go. I get some water to just about boiling, I'd say 200 degrees Fahrenheit, and I inject it into the holes. Gravity will help it wick down into the dovetail joint, or the mortise and tenon joint in our case. Now you'll notice water's dripping out from the heel, down around the heel cap. This usually doesn't happen so fast. The water usually is contained within the joint because the glue is a seal. But in our case, there's a broken seal or a broken joint. I put the hot wire foam factory cutters down in the 15th fret slot holes for 12 minutes. Then I start doing my dance. I dance around for a while, and every 4 or 5 minutes I also put a little water down around the heat probes just to make sure it doesn't scorch the wood right here on the surface. There's always going to be a little scorching inside. And then I wipe it dry with some Q-tips. You can see here that the joint is getting loose, and I usually at this point get the Stumac neck removal jig out. I had to attach a separate caul to the treble side because there's a cutaway, and the neck removal jig doesn't account for cutaway guitars. A couple turns of the screw and that pushes the neck out of the body. And actually with the mortise and tenon joint, if you know exactly what you're working on, which I didn't, because this is, again, as a lot of times, the first ever YouTube video on this particular model of a neck pull, but you don't have to pull it down from the neck. You can pull it straight back because it's a mortise and tenon joint. There she blows. No damage. Just a little scorch mark on the paper tag. And I drilled those holes just right. Didn't go down into the neck block or through the soundboard one bit. I did have a little bit of binding that stayed stuck. That's on the treble side, and there it is. That's my only boo-boo, because on the body side it pulled the binding and the finish, and it created a little gap that I have to do a finish repair on. It's like one of the heat probes went right through my earplug. But I see some moisture in the earplug. It looks like it did keep the moisture from going into the interior of the body there. So that was a good call. I like wrapping the area with wet paper towels and letting it set for 20 minutes to a half hour. It just makes cleanup a lot easier. You just scrape it right off with a, razor blade or a spatula of some kind. Same thing over on the soundboard and the dovetail over here. It's actually a mortise and tenon joint. It's not the simple dovetail. The simple dovetail would be flared out like this. It would still be straight, but it would definitely have that flare this way, and it would be straight up and down this way. But it's a mortise and tenon joint.
And there's a look at that earplug covering the hole through the sound hole there. Here's a look at how I hold the guitar in the total vise at a slight angle that allows for the water to drip off the heel and not down the back of the guitar. I glued in that loose piece of binding. It pulled away with the neck. When the neck was pulled, the binding pulled away and it left a little rip damage on the lacquer where the binding and the lacquer, or where the lacquer overlaid the wood and the plastic. So I glued that in with Titebond 3, which is a polymer. It's a proprietary polymer. Titebond 1 and Titebond 2 are both aliphatic resins, and then Titebond translucent is PVA, polyvinyl acetate. I have a friend from Australia who it's commonly referred to, Titebond original is referred to as PVA. It's just like saying, hand me that Kleenex, even if it's not an actual box of Kleenex brand. I watch a violin luthier. His name is Olaf, I think. He's in Brisbane, Australia, and he says it all the time too. He says PVA, and you can see the stuff he's digging out of the violins is aliphatic resin. And he does it like me too. It's kind of cool to find out that I'm doing something the same as a violin guy, using wet paper towels. Anyways, these little pieces, I just used CA glue that is of the gel master glue. It's that glue boost stuff. It works real good for binding. Anyways, now we'll come over and start cleaning up the mortise and dovetail, or the mortise and tenon. If I had a nickel for every time I called it a mortise and dovetail. The tenon. The tenon is the male side of the joint. We'll hit it with some 80 grit sandpaper on a craft stick and get all that nasty PVA off of there. Okay, so I used the sandpaper to clean up the joint real good, and I got this one clamp on it. I've also got a 3/1000 of an inch feeler gauge, making sure that the heel is still tight up against the body. I've reinstalled the screw and tightened it real good. I've got the neck here, and I've got the strings right up to full tension. E standard tuning, right where we were before I took the neck off. Now I wanted to do this first. I put 3 shims down underneath the saddle, and I'm almost where I want the saddle. It could go a little bit higher, but first what I'll do, so it's actually quite nice. So first what I'll do is I'll go back to my relief gauge thing and see where the top deflection is. It says 42, but I think maybe I don't have the feet out quite as far as they were earlier before the neck came off the first time. Regardless, see there it says 47. As I move the feet outward a little bit more, it says 48. Okay, now you could leave this strung up overnight and come back tomorrow and see it says 52 or something. Actually, it does say 50 already. Maybe the wood takes a second to kind of flex upward. Anyways, that's the great thing about these mortise and tenon joints, is that you can test the neck angle without committing to the glue by using the screw. And as you can see, I don't know, there was a little gap there and something was a little off from the factory, I think, on this one. I don't think it's going to take much to reset the neck as far as taking off material from the heel. I mean, I've got 3 shims in here, good height on the saddle, and really low action right here, 4/64. So you can see here, this is the original saddle, but it's got a little more height to it now. And the thing I wanted to show you about this clamp is that, the thing I wanted to show you about that bar clamp is that because the back is sloped so far this way, the clamp wanted to slide up. So I had to use a hockey puck in between the clamp and the back. This not only provides traction for the clamp, but it prevents the clamp from denting the lacquer, because this, to hold the neck in there like this, it does take quite a bit of force on the bar clamp. So just a little precautionary thing to use. I tried felt at first, but it was sliding all around. So I knew I needed to go with something that was going to give me some traction. Hockey puck's always the best for that. You can slice them up out right on the bandsaw. I'll do some sandpaper pulls while pressing the fretboard up against the edge of the desk. It tilts the neck back a little bit. That's how we changed the pitch of the neck this time. Didn't need much. But now I gotta match the center of the heel cap area to the two sides where I pulled the sandpaper. It's gonna take a little rocking. It didn't take much, but I decided to use the slow setting high tack fish glue on this, since the joint was completely contaminated with static adhesive. Fish glue is much better than hot hide glue when it comes to contaminated joints. And it'll allow me a lot more time to get the screw back in. I'm gonna put the hockey puck back over here. I'm working as fast as possible. I've even sped up the video, so it took a lot longer than it looks. Get the screw in there with the Phillips extension bit, and then I'll use this ratcheted screwdriver, a Craftsman, to torque down on it, because you can't get a lot of wrist rotation going on through it all. I'll let it set with the where the neck doesn't have any pressure on it. But I'll also want to use a couple different cauls and clamps to apply pressure to the fingerboard extension. These oak cauls that I have in between the frets have a scooped out radius on the underside of each of them. It's a lot more kind of like a 12-inch radius that I sanded into the bottom side of these 1/4-inch oak cauls. That's why it's okay using that 1C clamp there. But, there's evidence that there's some adequate pressure being applied. And I'll use my scoop sticks and a wet paper towel to clean up the squeeze out. Got that idea from Mike McConville. Can't remember how I used to do it before, but that's how he describes it. He calls them scoop sticks. Next day, it's a new day and a good morning. It's a good day to remove a pickguard. Don't want to use any solvents while removing a pickguard because you could damage the finish. I was told to use dental floss. Pretty good. This long spatula works better. Now, I'm deciding on pickguard material. The customer gave me 3 different pickguards to choose from, and none of them fit the footprint that was left by the original. Now here's a taller, unbleached bone saddle that I think looks good. But the pickguard, I decided on this Stu Mac dark brown shell. It ain't cheap, folks. It's $77 for that sheet. That's the retail price. I get a wholesale cost on it, but still. The Pickguard material alone cost me close to $30 per Pickguard. I can get 2 of them out of that sheet. I'll rough it out on the bandsaw and then I'll move it over here to this String Tech disc sander. Clean up the edges. I'm getting down to that pencil line that I made on the low-tack tape, and then I'll go around it with a razor blade and scrape it nice and smooth. I usually peel off the protective film first, and then I go around the edge with a razor blade and just make sure there's all the scratches are gone, and I kind of put a bevel on it. Yep. It comes with its own double stick tape, a PSA adhesive. I will peel that off and flip it into place. Dark brown shell. The most beautiful material I've ever seen. And it's not even, it doesn't have any photograph. Like, it's not a photograph of an old piece of tortoise. It's actual, I don't know what it is. It's impregnated into this material somehow, and it doesn't look pixely or fake. It looks real good. I used ebony dust and thin CA glue to fill in those exaggerated string ramps that are out in front of the pinholes. I'll use a file to remove the bulk of the excess, and then I'll use my hand drill to chamfer the pinholes, top edge of the pinholes. If you chuck this fancy thing up into a drill, it chatters, so this is the only reason I ever use this hand drill. I'll also go at it with some 120 grit on a craft stick and some 220. I'll work my way up to 600 and then apply a little wax and oil. Maybe some of that Howard's Weed and Feed wax. Now a 10mm wrench to remove the Grover tuners. 10mm socket speeds things up. Remember, the customer provided me with a fresh set of $300 Waverly tuners. The Grovers have gotta go. They're too bulky. They work okay, but come on, guys. I think Grovers are okay for Les Pauls, but not Martins. Martins need to have open gear tuners. High quality. Classy. Reinstall the strap button. And then I'll chamfer the holes before widening them with a reamer. Now the weird thing about the Waverleys is that it's kind of reversed as the way the headstock is drilled. The Grovers, they drill out the back side of the headstock really wide. But on the Waverleys, you want to leave the back side of the headstock more narrow, like at a 1/4 inch hole. So I kind of wish it had vintage style tuners and not those Grovers. It would work a little bit cleaner with these Waverleys, but we'll get these Waverleys to work. I'll do the last bit by hand with a hand reamer, and then I'll apply a little bit of the old brown glue around each bushing before I press it in by hand. They're kind of loose, so that's why I used glue. And I'll use the same glue here for these 2 frets. Chamfering the top edge of the nut slot is common. It helps the fret go back in with ease. These went in a little too easy anyways. I don't know what happened here. The wood shrinkage? What's going on? I don't know. But these frets went in too easy. I warmed up the old brown glue to 140 degrees in my pot of water over here and spread it around with an X-Acto blade, wiped up the mess, and we'll just hammer these frets in. I crimped the tangs a little bit so that they would grab on a little better. And that was the 14th and 15th fret going back in. Now I'm seeing here the 1st and 2nd fret. Maybe the 1st through 5th frets have a deep gouge where the B string gets played. So I'll protect the wood with Music Nomad fret shield, and we'll go at it with a 3-corner file. This is a Nicholson fine toothed single cut. After the file, I'll also go at it with sandpaper to polish, but I won't film that. This video is getting a little bit long. I like using the Dynaglide on a diamond file to remove the Nicholson file scratches real quick here. I just kind of go oblique to the fret. I just did the frets 1 through 7. Basically just the treble side, just to get rid of that notch. And when I hit it with the sandpaper, it'll homogenize everything a bit better. You do want to clean up the neck rest real good after doing frets. That'll scratch up the lacquer really bad. So I reinstalled, or I put the Waverleys in and installed the one screw, the leftover screw hole from the Grovers, so that I knew exactly where to drill the new screw holes. And I hold the guitar at an angle in my tech deck so that the headstock is perfectly horizontal. I don't like working on a headstock that has a tilt to it. First I go in full depth with the smallest drill bit, and then I'll go up in size and I'll go about half that depth, and then I'll go in with a third size bigger and just barely go in just the top little edge of it. It just creates a little stepped hole for the screw to screw into. It's just a really nice fit. And you want to use this specialized tool with the Waverleys because they have a slotted screw, which is very hard to deal with, because when your screwdriver slips off of the slotted head, it usually gouges down into the guitar surface somewhere. You know, you're usually pushing down on the screw pretty hard, and then you're turning and it slips out, and next thing you know, you've got a damaged guitar. So this little tool is vital. It's one of those tools that once you've used it, you just you don't want to be without it. I wonder why companies still use slotted head screws. Maybe it's to be traditional. These Waverleys are nice, but I gotta say too that Grover makes a set just like this. I think they're called Stay Tight or something. They're good. I don't know what the big difference is between the $300 set of tuners and the $60 set of tuners. Just a name? Interesting. Very interesting.
There was an exaggerated break angle because of those ramps that were cut into the, the string slots that were cut in front of the pinholes. I filled those in because I don't want an excessive break angle on this, because what happens is it makes the strings feel too stiff when you go into a bend. if you have too much break angle. That's kind of the same philosophy behind why people over wrap or top wrap their stop tailpiece on a Les Paul to get it to feel more slinky. So that's why I filled those in, and it turns out that the titanium bridge pins, that slot that's in the pin is wide enough where I don't need to do any sort of notching to the bridge at all. I mean, I filled it in, and the strings are going in, and they're just perfectly fitting into these big wide slots in the pins. So you see there's no ramp, and easily goes all the way down. But I gotta say it again, because I didn't say it right. The original saddle was so low that the strings were too low. They weren't the good half-inch distance from the top that you want. So the main deal with this guitar was to get a taller saddle, not because of the break angle, just because it was, you know, the strings were too close to the top. And now they're a good half-inch off the top, just under, which is exactly what you usually want. It's not, you know, that's not a rule that's written in blood anywhere. It's just a general rule of thumb that the strings should be about a half-inch above the body. Thing to remember about these mortise and dovetails, if your Martin has one of these on the neck block, that the mortise and tenon is only 3/4 of an inch wide. There's also this book out now that you can get on Amazon, C.F. Martin Guitars, a repair guide by Patrick DeBurrow. And every single neck joint that Martin makes there's illustrations and lots of descriptions and lots of great stuff in this book. So if you're doing Martin neck resets, I'd definitely spend the $50 on this book. Guys, thanks so much for joining me today. I hope to see you around next week. We'll catch you later.